y'all, it's Andrea. Today we find out what Party City masks look like in the future. We discover just how incompetent the security team really is. And special note, this episode is brought to you by the letter P. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the number one place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
And I'm Andrea. Shereese, today we are reviewing Season 1, Episode 6. This one is called Lonely Among Us, which I have some thoughts on that title. I actually really like it. This episode was written by Michael Halperin and DC Fontana and directed by Cliff Boole. The stardate is 41249.3. Shereese, what are your overall thoughts on this episode?
So when I saw this episode, something that's kind of interesting is that here we have, for lack of a better word, I'll call it an electricity virus, or maybe, an electricity parasite.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of getting a little bit of a flashback vibe to the Naked Now, because again, we've got this like contagious agent that's kind of roaming through the crew. But what's different about this is that it's a sentient entity, right? Like it can think, it can act, and it's not just infecting everyone willy-nilly and dragging the ship to destruction. Instead, it's kind of selectively picking different systems and different people to possess in order for it to find out more information. So I thought that was actually kind of an interesting storyline.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool too. The whole part about these other aliens who are just sort of on board the ship to go to this like conference or whatever they're doing. I thought that was silly and like a very useless like subplot, and the costumes were terrible. But the overall idea of like passing through this energy field and it somehow kind of hitches a ride on the Enterprise and infects one person and then another, like in sequence to try to like, it's trying to accomplish some sort of purpose. It's not just the Naked Now. It's just spreading just to spread. I actually thought that this was a pretty good episode because of that reason, where this is the only time, as we had talked about last week, this was the only time that Gene Roddenberry allowed for any kind of conflict between the main characters, was if one was possessed by some sort of alien force. Otherwise, everybody had to like work together in perfect harmony. But this was one instance where, they discussed mutiny, which is a really, really big deal. Yeah. Like. All right. So before we get super into it, let me give us the plot breakdown for those of you who are listening with us. All right. The Enterprise is en route to the planet Parliament, which Picard keeps calling Parliament, which bothers me. Parliament. So the Enterprise is en route to the planet Parliament with delegates from 2 warring planets when the ship encounters a strange energy cloud. Worf is hit with this energy when it discharges as the ship passes through the cloud, causing him to become violent. Dr. Crusher sedates Worf and brings him to sickbay, but is also infused with the energy as she examines his body. Crusher begins to act oddly to those around her and goes to the bridge, asking questions about the ship's navigational functions. When she questions Data at one of the science station, the energy spark between her and the console, leaving her confused as to why she's on the bridge. That's where our episode sort of picks up. So the Sele and the Antikins are these 2 warring alien species that are en route to Parliament. And their costumes and their makeup, I mean, I don't want to even say makeup because they're just wearing masks. So I guess costumes. Yeah. They're so bad. I mean, to me, it's like a throwback to like the original series of just like super cheesy. Like you got a rubber mask and kind of glued it around your mouth. So when you move your mouth, like it sort of moves the mask's mouth. Yeah. It's really bad. So on set, the costume designers refer to them as the snakes and the dogs because that's
exactly what they are. The costumes were so okay, let's take a step back. So we've got these 2 delegates, these 2 people from warring nations, and they're going to this planet in order to ask to be let into the Federation.
Right.
So that's the big idea, is they want to become Federation citizens. However, they hate each other. And so there's kind of the subplot of people going, I don't know if they're going to be a good fit. I don't know. Like they're clearly not about peace and togetherness and whatever else the Federation's supposed to stand for. But maybe there's hope. Okay. So they beam onto the ship, and we start with the Sele, right? Which are the snakes.
Yes.
We start with the snakes in the beginning. And we've got everybody, the top officers, Will and Picard and Yar. We've got them in the transporter room as they show up.
Like ceremonial, like uniform, by the way.
Which I love those, right? They're so fancy. They're basically dresses, but they're awesome dresses that even guys look great in. This is different. This is like the opposite of the shorty skirt.
This
right?
is the opposite of the shorty.
Because it looks good on everybody.
Which we do see in this episode, but I'll get to that later. Yeah.
We do see that in episode. But these dress robes, like from Harry Potter, that's kind of what I think of them as. They look super nice. They on everybody.
They do. And you know what? They've got that like gold piping, which is like, very fancy. And you don't see them very much in the entire series. Like you really
it's only
don't.
for fancy occasions.
It's a treat to see them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
So anyway, so they show up. So the Sele show up, and then they start sniffing around, and they're like, "You brought the Antikins here first. How dare you? We're so offended." And then they're like, "Make sure that wherever you put us on the ship, that we're like, upwind of the Antikins." And I was like, "Wait a minute, there is no wind on a ship. What in the world?" Like,
thought the same thing. Where I was like, "Upwind? What a bunch of crap that is." But you know what? Riker is such a diplomatic speaker. Like, I'm sure we can figure something out that works for you. Because I would have been like, there is no upwind. Figure it out.
There's no wind, buddy. There's no wind. But they end up putting them on like completely different decks. And then throughout the episode, which we probably won't talk about too much because it's a really stupid subplot. Throughout the episode, they're playing like cat and mouse and trying to kill each other. And it's just it's so there's that. And then back to Andrea's point, back to your point about the costumes. When I first saw these glued on masks that the mouths don't even move with, I thought maybe it's because it was 1987. Maybe the technology just wasn't there for really good monster makeup. And then in the very next scene, we see Worf on the bridge. And I was like, oh, wait, no, they had the technology. No, Worf looks amazing. Like, he looks like a legit alien. Like, you can't see the glue marks on his forehead. So I was like, nah, they phoned it in for these aliens. They knew they were just going to be here for an episode. They didn't even.
I guess from a production standpoint, you don't want to invest too heavily on an alien race that you're never going to see again, right?
Well,
like,
what do you don't from a like monetarily, but like as a fan, it's a little bit offensive. And I will say that for the rest of the series, well, we'll see because I don't remember season 1, but I don't remember seeing such horrible costumes again. I feel like they take it to a level, at least moving forward, where whenever they have an alien, even if it's a one-time alien. They make them look legit. Like, even if they just make their nose ridges big or their eyebrows really big or something subtle.
Like the Bajoran. Like we see Ensign Ro a lot in later seasons, but we don't actually see the Bajoran people a ton. They kind of sprinkle them here and there, but they make these minor changes that make them look alien enough that we believe it. Like rubber masks. And like, and the Sele, who are the snakes, are like hissing and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, so they're like super snakes. And what happens later on in the season is they start to take the monster makeup artist, the magician behind all of this, starts to take those inspirations from nature and subtly put them into alien makeup. So the Cardassians, who we're going to see probably in season 6 or 7, because they're back with the Bajora, they look like snakes. They are like snake people. But they look like people with a snake touch to them. They've got like a bigger neck. They've got like a scaly kind of look. They've got like a green kind of tint to their skin. But they're definitely still like humanoid. And so they do ramp it up. But here they definitely ramped it down. They just went to Party City and they were like, what you got? I need 6 of each of these. Okay, we're going to go with dogs and snakes. And we're good. I mean, wow.
Yes.
So anyways.
I honestly think that the Antikins, who are those like dog looking aliens, I feel like they did a slightly more creative job on those, where they made the back of their heads like huge and then they had those like crazy eyebrows, which I mean, it didn't look good.
No.
But I feel like for the Sele, they were like, some guy went to Party City and some guy went to like Party Town. And they both, and they both came together and went, what did you find? What did you find? And the Antikin guy was like, well, I found these. We can sort of augment them. And the snake guy was like, oh, I just found snakes. Like, so we're just going to have to make that work. Anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway,
anyways, that's a weird subplot that I think they get better later on in the seasons about making subplots that are parallel with the actual plot, where you're like, oh, that kind of makes sense.
Right.
But not yet. Now it's just 2 different things that don't match at all, that have nothing to do with each other, just to have some drama going on.
Yeah, it was a very bad subplot, but one that we don't see again, thankfully. So, all right. So as they're on their way to Parliament, they pass through this energy field. And I have a few thoughts on this. One, it's a really, really cool concept, I think. They're passing through. They don't really know exactly what it's going to be.
And they're trying to avoid it, and it moves to kind of like be in their path.
It's moving at warp speed, which is crazy
amazing.
because I know, because just like a cloud is basically chasing you, which even in today's standards would be like, what the hell? And I like the special effects a lot on this. Like
So cool. That energy cloud was amazing.
Yes, they do such a great job, which is contrasted by the terrible job they did on the Sele and the Antikins. Yeah, with the costumes. But the energy field is great. Did you notice that when Worf and LaForge are working on the sensor array to like calibrate it or whatever, which is where Worf gets like zapped?
Yeah.
They're in this room that we never see again. Like I did not recognize that room at all, which I thought was really cool. Because it's like, you guys could have had them in main engineering or some other like freestanding, you know, permanent sort of set structure, but you guys built like a little corner of a room for them to film this in. Like that is super cool. And it looked great. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think it's so like cool. this separate science station room that's just kind of this ancillary set that they use very rarely. I'm thinking of another episode in season 6, I think, where they use that same room, but you pretty much never see that. So that's kind of cool. It's kind of special. And you get this little moment between LaForge and Worf where you find out that Worf is not a senior officer, which totally threw me because I was like, I just don't remember much of season 1, as you all know. Right. So I'm like, but he is a senior officer. Spoiler alert, he does become a senior officer. So as does Geordi.
Red. He's also wearing red too, which
but that just means they're in command. That they could be in command training. Like training to be in command.
I suppose that's true because at this point, LaForge still doesn't really have like a main role. Like he's a key player, but he's he's just like an ensign at some point. Not an ensign, but he's like
he's not an ensign, but he's not in charge of anything in particular. And neither is Worf. They both work on the bridge, so they're bridge officers.
Yes,
but they're not senior officers.
Yes.
LaForge might be. He might be in those conversations, but they don't call Worf into the room to like have special conversations or whatever yet. And so that was kind of like a special little moment because I was like, wait a minute, Worf's a junior. What? Like it totally was like, that's new.
Yeah. Okay, so Worf gets hit by this energy field, which I think is pretty clearly spelled out early on that we as viewers can see the lightning and all that, but nobody else can.
Right. Except for Geordi a little bit.
A little bit, right?
He saw a glow, but he didn't see the actual zappy part.
Exactly. He did not see the zappy part. So Worf is knocked out. And then when he kind of comes to, he's like violent and thrashy, which I think makes sense as a viewer until he goes to sickbay and Beverly is examining him and she touches his body and gets the zap from him. And it barely phases her. She's just standing there going, huh. She's like, well, she's getting zapped. This knocked Worf on his ass. Like it knocked him unconscious. And Beverly's like, I'm fine. Everything's fine. We're all fine.
She just turns into this really creepy pod person. Yeah. And I have to say, and I mean, I'm going to say this again and again throughout our show. I love when Beverly Crusher does crazy scenes. I just love her as like a nut job. I think she does such a good job. So when she's possessed, I'm just like, I believe it. I totally believe it. And this was no exception. She was super creepy. You could tell she was out of it. And you're like, what the heck is going on? Yeah. And I think, at the end of the episode, the electricity parasite does explain it and says like, when I was first ripped from my home, I was scared and I was afraid. I didn't know what was going on. And then I kind of got my bearings.
I missed that.
Yeah. He has this big monologue at the end where he's like, I was terrified. And then I was like, what's going on? And then I was trying to figure it out. And then I was jumping from place to place to try to learn how to communicate with you like primitive beings until I finally got, to this situation, and we'll talk about that when we get to the end of this. Yeah.
Okay, so here is a thought that I'm having right now. This crew is fairly fresh off of what happened in episode 2, which is the Naked Now. So they should be on pretty high alert for like infectious, whatever you want to call it, floating around the ship, right? And so, in episode 2, people touch and then they all get this virus or whatever that was, whatever we described that as. And so here you are 4 episodes later and Worf gets zapped and is acting strangely, then has memory loss once the electricity leaves him. And then Beverly's now acting strangely. And Beverly interacted with Troy, with Wesley, with Geordi, with Data, and with Picard, and none of them raised the alarm at all. They all recognized that she was acting strangely and they were like, are you all right? Like something weird's kind of going on. She goes, I'm fine. Like really creepy and crazy and weird. And nobody raises the alarm. You guys just came from the Naked Now. How are you not being like, touching your comm badge? Like, hey, so maybe we need to just keep Beverly isolated out of an abundance
I always
of
wonder about that. I always wonder about that because Beverly is the chief medical officer on the ship.
caution.
So who do you call when the chief medical officer needs to be like medically quarantined? We don't really see any other medical staff that have names. We do have Nurse Onagawa like way in season whenever she shows up. I don't know.
She's way down
so
the
she
road.
does end up getting like a nurse helper at some point, but like here sometimes you just see random people giving hypo sprays, but none of them have a name. Like there's who do you call? And it's the same thing that I have with the same issue I have whenever Captain Picard goes Lulu, because it's like, who do you call? And that's when they're like, I don't know, mutiny, I guess, because it's kind of like there's no other person to be like, hey, I'm concerned about so and so. Let's go do something about that. And actually, that happens in this episode. And I'm always like, if you're going to infect people, we definitely don't want the chief medical officer to have a medical condition that she cannot diagnose because she's in the middle of it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And for a ship whose complement is like 1,000 and like, I think they said like
they
1,
should have more than one doctor.
They really should. They really should.
I'm sure they do.
If I were a doctor and I were in charge of 1,000 people, I'd be pretty worried about that.
Yeah, and then you get possessed by some lightning monster.
All right, so nobody raises the alarm on Beverly's strange behavior. But while this is going on, the ship continues to experience shutdowns. You know, at one point it's like just the comm station is shut down, and then the science station is shut down. And then, slowly it becomes more and more. And they make a great point where they go, this ship is less than 1 year out of the dock. What are the odds that this could be happening just by circumstance or by coincidence? And Data goes, nothing. There's no chance. Which you go, because now we're sort of seeing kind of the same thing that we saw in the Ferengi episode where the ship is experiencing massive power failures. And I think that they really lean heavily on the same kind of like just handful of plots. Like somebody's infected and it's spreading, and the ship is experiencing massive shutdowns. Right.
And someone's going to die. That's always a theme. Someone's going to die. But in this case, the someone is the Antikins and the Cele that we're barely aware of as we're going through this whole, like, what is this electricity thing? What's going on?
Yes. So this is one of the first times that we see the whole bridge crew kind of meeting in the observation lounge. It's not the first, but it's one of the very early ones. And I noticed there's this great panning shot that pans from the outside of the ship looking in towards the observation lounge. And I think Picard is like standing at the window kind of looking out, and it pans like right into the lounge. And I thought that's really cool. Like this show is starting to get its legs underneath it. So, it's starting to get its sea legs a little bit, and it's finding its kind of style. And those panning shots are really lovely. And you hear that like beautiful like hum of the ship. It's just, it creates this nice little like cozy kind of environment. Like you're in this observation lounge. It's kind of dark. Now we're talking about what's going on with the ship. Why is everything shutting down? And then we also see, so they talk about Chief Engineer Argyle, who only makes an appearance one time in the previous episode, but he is mentioned by name, which I'm sure the guy who was the actor for Argyle was like, wait, what the hell? Like, you mentioned me, but I don't act.
Can't I at least be on the comms?
In the background or something. But yeah, so they talk about Chief Engineer Argyle, but we see a new like assistant chief engineer, Mr. Singh, who I think is really interesting because they hired an actor who is of like Indian descent and has an Indian English accent, which I thought was really cool because they're really kind of showing a little bit of that diversity. Because everybody else on the show speaks in like a perfect California accent, like with no accent. But unfortunately, as is what happens, he dies.
Yeah. So Singh was just the new red shirt. That's just what happened. However, I like that too. And I have to say, as far as diversity goes, like in the original series, we did have a little bit of diversity. Most of the people were European, and the way that they envisioned diversity was different types of European people, right? That was like diverse. Right? So we're going to pick people from different parts of Europe.
Yes.
And that's true because you don't see that on American sitcoms. Everybody's American. There's like one random person from England and England only, right? We're not doing Ireland, Scotland. We're not doing all that. We're doing England, right? So technically, yes, the original series did have diversity because it picked different Europeans from Europe. And then we have Uhura, the one brown-skinned person on the show.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to like, this is now 20 years after the original. And let's see how far we've come with diversity. When you look around the bridge staff, they're all Europeans and they're all American. I mean, they're all not Europeans. They're all American.
Yeah.
They're all like Caucasian American. And that's pretty much it. We have Geordi. So yay. We've got some brown on the bridge, and we also have Worf. But what's interesting is they didn't kind of go as far as the original series did with having people with accents, right? Because a lot of people in the original series had accents, and people in the Enterprise just don't. Like, everyone speaks perfect English for the most part.
Yeah, that's why Mr. Singh stands out so much because of that.
I kind of wish they would have had a little bit more diverse people on the show throughout the 7 years. Like, to my recollection, that's the only person of Indian descent that I recall on the show. And it was like on for 7 years. And like, yeah, we don't have a ton of Asian people. I'm not thinking of any, we don't have lots of accents. So,
you're right.
The diversity level, even though it's 20 years in the future, like literally in our time zone of where the original series was to where TNG starts.
Yes. It's 20 years since the original series ended. Yeah, in their time, it's 78 years since.
Yeah, so it's like 100 years later.
Yeah,
and you would think they're less diverse. So, I don't know. I did like, when I first saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't remember there being like a person of Indian descent on the show before, and then he dies. And I was like, aw.
I know.
Kind of a bummer. Like, I would have liked to see him like at least last another episode.
Yeah, he dies almost immediately. But I think it's one of those moments, just like in the episode Code of Honor, where Yarina's glove like goes flying and then it impales that guy and he dies immediately. So they need to show us that this energy field can be deadly and like how dangerous it really is, because so far we just see Worf gets knocked unconscious, but he's fine. Beverly's totally fine. Like, she gets it and it's like no big deal. But yeah, so I think Singh's death had to prove to the audience that like this is actually dangerous. Yeah.
And actually, now that I think about it, just on that last rant about diversity, we did have another person of, I believe, Indian descent in maybe he was Asian. I have to go back and look, but somebody who was non-Caucasian in engineering in The Naked Now. Remember, he was the guy who pulled out all the Isoliner chips.
Yes, I think he was of like Asian American or like Filipino descent.
I think
or something.
So, but unfortunately, he was only in that one episode, and then never again do we see him. Or that engineer at the time was a woman, the chief engineer in that episode, and we don't see her again either. So we're just going through some transitions in our casting.
Yeah, I really wonder why they kept rotating that so much, and I wonder if it was just they were trying to find pieces that would fit and like what played well. But yeah, you're right. And here's the thing as well, the casting for the bridge crew has several women. We have Dr. Crusher, who's chief medical officer, so she's in sickbay most of the time, but she also can be on the bridge.
We
have Deanna Troi, and we have Natasha Yar, and Majel Barrett, who was Gene Roddenberry's wife, basically pulled Marina Sirtis aside and said,
and that's the woman who plays Troy.
Yes. So thank you. She pulled the actress aside who plays Troy and said, we are probably not going to renew you for next season. And that was worrisome because Majel Barrett, who's again Roddenberry's wife and plays the voice of the computer and plays Deanna Troy's mother in later season. Lwaxana Troi. She basically said, we have enough women or we have too many women, which I think that's total BS, but whatever. This was the 80s. And the only reason that Deanna Troy's character continued on the show is because Denise Crosby, who plays Yar, quit. And so did Gates McFadden, who plays Dr. Crusher. She also quit in season 1. And so that only had Deanna Troi as the sole female on the bridge. And her position on the Enterprise through all 7 seasons was basically secured because the 2 other women left. And then,
wow.
Yes, which makes me sad because at no point in any kind of casting have I ever heard, we have too many men here. There's 3 men and that's too many. It's like
or we have 7 men on our cast and 2 women. That's just way too many men. It's 2 women, too many women. I'll often see with the women casting is it's like we need more diversity with our women. Let's make sure one is blonde, one's a redhead, and one's a brunette. There we go. And I'm like, that is, I don't really, but we could go on that conversation all day. Trust us.
Yes.
So we're going to move on.
Yes. Okay. So
but they did do some switcheroos with the casting going on at this point.
They sure did. Okay. So Singh dies, unfortunately. So he's gone. just a minor point, we see a shorter uniform at 20 minutes and 46 seconds, like walking by. So we are still deep in shorter uniform territory in this season. Oh my God, Shereese, this is the first time, and sows the seeds for later episodes, that we see Data as Sherlock Holmes.
Yes. I loved it. I was like, oh, this is so wonderful, because Sherlock Holmes does become a little bit of a recurring theme in the show. I mean, I guess not too much, because it only comes up a couple more times over the 7 seasons, but every time I get so excited because I'm a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes and a huge fan of Data. So that combination is just like chocolate and peanut butter. Wonderful.
You know what? I love it. And I was actually concerned when I saw this episode unfolding, as they brought up Sherlock Holmes. I thought, oh God, you're not going to go to the holodeck and start playing Sherlock Holmes, are you? Like in the
That's what I thought too.
Shutting down. Yes,
that's what I thought too.
It's nice that we just see like light touches of it, but he's got the pipe, and then later he's got the magnifying glass. And for me, it's the same thing as the Chinese finger trap in the previous episode. Like, where did you get that from? Did you just bring it into your meeting?
Just replicated it and just brought it together everywhere he went.
It's not like you have pockets or like cargo pants. Like you can just pull these things. You walked into a meeting with a pipe, and then later he turned and looked at the lionfish. As a marine biologist, I went, ooh, lionfish, cool. The lionfish in Captain Picard's ready room. And he looked at it with a magnifying glass, and I went, were you double fisting props? Like you had a pipe in one hand, a magnifying glass in another? Like, where was this coming from? I love when Data does something that the rest of the crew finds amusing, because you see them exchanging glances and kind of smiling. And it makes me wonder, were the actors close to breaking? Were they acting that? Like, was anything improvised there? Like, I really would love to have somebody on the show who was there or part of that, like writing staff or part of the cast and crew, to let us know, because sometimes you hear, oh no, the crew was like cracking up, they couldn't get through that scene, and that just makes it for me like just more enjoyable, because I'm like, oh, there they are, they're like cracking up.
We'll have to ask Brent Spiner when he's on our show. So that's the guy who plays Data, and I would love to have you on our show, Brent. So if we have you on when we have you on our show someday, we'll definitely ask you what people's reactions were, because if you see Brent Spiner in other movies, which he's been in a ton of movies, a ton of shows, done a ton of voice acting, but if you see him in other movies and shows, like, he is such a dynamic, vibrant person. And if you see him on panels, he's so funny. He's just like hilarious, and he's always got people cracking up. But he's playing this character who is devoid of humor and emotion and personality, pretty much. And so I always love that like juxtaposition, that like little mix of an actor who's like got so much range playing someone who has no range. I find it super fascinating. So I wonder that too, like,
that is really, really fun. I find the same thing. So I'm a huge fan of The Office, and I listen to the Office Ladies podcast, and Angela Kinsey, who plays Angela Martin on The Office, she's just like us. She's like very bubbly and like laughing all the time and just lots of comedy. But on the show, she plays this like super uptight bitch who just it has no like range other than just frustration and irritation. And I think I think that must be really, really fun to play a character who's so opposite to yourself, but at the same time probably frustrating, because to play a straight man is hard. I would be laughing I would be pissing off the other actors left and right, because I would just be cracking up, and then they'd have to reset the scene over and over again. Like, be like, we're going to be here all day if Andrea can't get it together.
So I wonder how many times that happened on the cast of TNG, like how many times they were just like, too funny, like, let's start over.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yes. All right. So back to the story. So Troy is actually becoming more and more useful as the season goes on, which makes me happy to see. So she hypnotizes Dr. Crusher and Worf and figures out what was happening in that memory loss, like kind of lapse that they were experiencing. And the device that she uses makes me laugh too. It's like a little pinwheel, like electronically, that spins around. But I thought,
when I saw that scene, and I put this in my notes, I put, now Troy is a hypnotherapist. Okay. Why does she never use this power later on in the show? I don't know. But this was cool though. This was cool that all of a sudden now she's a hypnotherapist and she can just hypnotize people and like find out their memory. That's super handy. Like, that's a very legit, like,
and, honestly, they really should have pulled those guns out more, because in later seasons there are lots of times when there's memory loss. Like,
lots of times.
With the get your little gadget out and start like figuring out what's going on. And apparently you're the only person who can do it. So just do. Anyway, so she is useful, and she figures out that there is some sort of sentient entity that is not just like you've been electrocuted and you pass out. Like, something is happening Beverly does a great job, I think, in acting and coming across with the like, get out of my head, when she starts talking about how like even though she was acting normally, like internally there was this struggle. So she does this great job of conveying that, and Troy does a great job of sort of figuring that out. So props to Troy for being useful. So they go talk to Picard, who has meanwhile become infected, and I'm concerned.
So unfortunate
because he is acting so strangely. Like Beverly was acting weird, okay. But Picard is acting weird as hell. Like he is like becoming like a poet and talking too close to people and laughing and wondering what it's all about. It's like, this is red alert. Red alert. Why haven't any of you sounded the alarm? And at this point, Troy has already figured out that once you get zapped, you are basically being controlled by an alien being. So she says that she could feel this weird like duality in people, and she wasn't quite sure what that feeling was, but now she recognizes it. And Picard goes, great, let's bookmark that. And then he becomes infected, and Troy is like, I don't know what to tell you. It's like,
yeah, it's that same thing of like, who do you turn to when the boss goes bananas?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happens, right? Is they're like, he's acting weird. They all see him acting weird. They're trying to be respectful, like, yes, but you're the captain, so you can have your eccentricities. But they're like, but he's like telling us to turn around and go back to the energy cloud when we have this super urgent mission to bring these delegates, or else who knows what is to Parliament. Otherwise, who knows what's going to happen? And they've been going at warp 6.5 because they have to hurry up and get there. And now he's having them turn around, and everyone's looking at each other, exchanging glances like, this doesn't feel right. But no one wants to say anything because there's no boss to go to be like, hey, I'm concerned about this. And that's when you see them discussing the potential of mutiny, because Will's the only one they can turn to, and Beverly's the only one who can call a medical emergency.
Right, which is a big moment, I think, in any kind of, mutiny has been a term that everyone basically grew up knowing what it meant, even though we don't experience mutinies per se. But mutiny has always been a very critical moment on board any kind of sailing ship or any sort of, even ships today. A mutiny is really a big deal. And those who are found guilty of attempted mutiny, if you're going to mutiny, you better do it.
And you better be successful.
You better be successful, because the penalty is death.
Even because you can't be trusted, clearly.
Exactly.
I mean, it's mutiny. Modern day mutiny is called treason.
Yes.
So treason is when you cannot be trusted at all anymore. So we have to get rid of you.
And you still can be executed for that. People still are executed for treason today. So when they're sitting there talking about mutiny, I thought that was a really dramatic moment, because I thought, holy cow, this is like how bad things are getting, where the ship is shutting down. The Sully and the Antikins are playing hide and seek in the corridors, which is like so stupid. But besides that, some like really serious stuff is going on. And now obviously the captain has been incapacitated and putting the crew at further danger, because we're going back to that energy field where we had issues. Like, let's not go back. So I thought that was really, really, really
what I thought was going to happen. Device. Yeah, I agree. And what I thought was going to happen was, I thought they were going to go back to the energy cloud, and that like all the other entities inside the cloud were going to kind of swallow up the ship and infect all the people and like take them over and take over the Enterprise. And I was like, oh no, don't go back to the cloud. Don't go back to the cloud. They're all going to like take everybody. I thought it was going to be a total like pod person moment. And I'm actually kind of glad they didn't do that, because that would have been really scary. And I don't know how they would have gotten out of it. But that's also kind of what I like about the later like seasons, and some of the other shows in the Trek universe, is when they get in those positions where you're like, oh, I don't know how they're going to get the heck out of this. There's no way out of this. And then somehow, some way, something gets them out, and you're like, I never saw that coming. So anyways, I was like, I thought that was going to happen. I was like, oh my gosh, they're not going to get out of this. And then it didn't happen. And so part of me was like, oh, that's not as like dramatic. But the other part was like kind of relieved, because now I don't have to have this internal conflict of like, the entire Enterprise is infected by electricity people, and like, who will save them?
Yes. And I think it's easier to see a solution as a viewer when you have a situation like the Naked Now, where it's a virus and Dr. Crusher just has to figure it out. And there's 12 minutes left in the episode. So at some point in the next 9 minutes, she's going to figure it out, and she's going to administer a hypo spray to everyone or whatever. Right. But if every single person is infected, how the heck do you get out of that? Yeah. That's actually that. Yeah, that's anxiety producing. Okay, so Captain Picard is now Crusher and Riker and Troy come talk to him, and they kind of do the like my boss has gone crazy talk where they go, "Hey buddy, how you feeling?"
They do an intervention. And that's because Beverly is the only one who can legally say that the captain is incapacitated without it being a mutiny. Right? She could just say this is a medical situation where he is no longer fit for duty.
Yes.
And once he's better, then he can be back in charge. So she can do it. And she tries to do it very gently, and she gets shut down hard.
She does. And he starts doing the like, what's it all about? I don't have time for this, and orders the bridge crew to go through psychological evaluations, which they do. And then she brings him the results, and he just like tosses it on the table like, nah. Right. And at this point I'm thinking, okay, Beverly, here's your in right here. Like, declare him unfit for duty, and let's get the hell out of
the ship and keep him moving.
Yeah, exactly. So he totally blows her off, and then he goes onto the bridge and he starts monologuing and basically spills the beans about how he has been infected, where he says, yes, Picard is here, and so much more, which he says to Beverly. But when he goes out onto the bridge, he's basically speaking for the alien race, going, we've infected one person and another, and we still couldn't find the right fit, and blah, blah, blah. And he's monologuing for like 2.5 minutes. And the bridge crew are standing there like a bunch of dum-dums just staring at it. Worf, get your phasers and get him out of there. Like, where... I just wrote on my index card, like, where is security in all this? Like,
I think they're all just shocked, right? They're just like, but it's our captain, but it's not our captain. But if we hurt him, we'll hurt our captain. But but is he really still monologuing? Oh my gosh, it's been another 2 minutes. You know what I mean? I think people are just in shock. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I just thought you guys are not a very effective bridge crew, because if somebody's admitting that they have been taken over by some sort of alien race, I'd be like, okay, let's go ahead and get you into the brig.
We're going to do it the American way. Just shoot him. Just shoot him and ask questions later.
Yes. Which maybe in Star Trek,
done, of course.
You escort him to the brig and keep him there, or keep him locked down in like sick bay. Take away his comm badge so he can't be like talking to the computer or whatever. Transfer control over to Riker and keep it moving. He ends up touching the comm panel and zapping everybody, and then just like waltzing over to transporter room and beaming himself out into the cloud.
Yeah, so I think what was going to happen is they were trying to stop him, and that's when he was like, nope, we're not doing that. And then he touches the comm panel, like, you're not stopping me. And I was like, whoa, like I wrote in my notes, wait a minute, he can electrocute everybody on the ship at the same time? Why has he been doing this one person at a time nonsense? Like, he could have done this in the beginning, just like zapped everybody, just zapped the whole ship. Jump in the computers, learn everything about the computers, turn the ship around internally. And like, I was like, well, this was, the long way. But yeah, he zapped everybody and we know he zapped everybody because when he gets to the transporter room, the transporter guy is laying on the floor zapped. So he just went through the whole ship's computer, every person, man, woman, child, everyone gets zapped.
I did wonder about that. I was like, he just saunters into the transporter room, and the guy's on the floor writhing around with like lightning coming out of him. And I'm going, did he send like a forward party to take care of that part? Like, why is this guy?
No, when he hit zap, he just hit zap on the max and just zapped everybody through the computer systems.
I thought it was just everybody in the bridge crew. Okay, I did not get that. All right.
And just went on to the transporters and was like, beam me out. Okay, so here's the thing about this beaming scene.
Thank you. Let's talk about that.
So they're saying like, we're going to just beam his energy. We don't need his matter because we are energy beings, and we'll just combine with his energy, and we're going to have a happy little, energy commune going on in space. And then when he gets transported, his body disappears. And I was like, but his body is matter. So I'm not sure this whole, we're beaming his energy, not his matter, because shouldn't his body still be here, but it should be drained of like ATP, right? It should just like have no physical energy inside of the body, like like no functioning. It's just like a shell of a body laying on the transporter. But I guess they didn't think of it that way. Because his body went into space, and I'm like, but his body can't survive in space.
Oh my god,
he would die.
That was a sticking point for me, hard, where I went, okay, you can't listen. We, as viewers of the show, I know when I start with listen, it's going to be a rant. I'm going to monologue now, Picard. But so we have to suspend our disbelief in a number of things in order to watch any kind of show. Like Game of Thrones, you have to suspend your disbelief in dead things coming back to life. Yeah. In Star Trek, that there's these, like all these rules, right? But then when you break that rule, there's got to be some sort of television and movie term for like you're breaking the rules that you yourself have like set up.
Mm-hmm.
You can't beam someone out into space. And then the crew, once they recover from their electrical shock, have scanners like looking for Picard's body in space for minutes at a time. And I'm like, no, he would have died instantly.
They couldn't find his body because they only beamed out energy, is what they're saying. His body wasn't physically in a space. Where did his body go then?
Thank you. That for me was very confusing and upsetting. Maybe not upsetting, but it was a little annoying because I was like, listen, his body is gone. It's out in space somewhere, but
definitely dead.
But it's also, you're definitely dead.
Definitely
but then
dead.
You're also like in the computer. So I like that. I think Riker would make a great captain. He can make the hard call. Like he's good at that. So they can't find him. And so Riker makes the tough call to say, set course for Parliament. We've got a timetable. We got to go. Like he's out there somewhere, but he's dead. So we'll have a memorial service later or whatever. Like we got to go. And then that's right when Troy goes, I can feel him somewhere. Right. But I thought this is a good
Troy
call,
to the
Riker.
rescue again.
Yeah. She's actually kind of a great character in this episode. Yeah, she is. But Riker makes a tough call, which I like. That's what you have to do as a captain. Like your first duty is to the ship and not to any one individual. And if you're that one individual out in space, that sucks for you. But listen.
But you beamed yourself into space, so I mean, it's not.
You did that to yourself,
like
man.
you kind of made your bed, and now you have to lay in it. So Troy to the rescue of being like, no, I can feel him. He's still here. Don't leave just yet. And then Picard jumps into the ship because they were like, maybe he'll go into the ship because that's what happened before. And also Troy does a whole like mind meld thing through space of like, oh, the combination didn't work. It was unsuccessful. And now he's just out there alone and he can't do anything and he has to come back. And he'll probably she just knew everything that was going on all of a sudden. She's like amped up her powers. Yeah, she's amped up her powers from just being like, I feel pain. So much pain to now she's like knows everything that just happened out in space that the sensors don't even know. Yeah.
She's like I've had an intergalactic tete-a-tete with this nebulous cloud and I figured out what they want, what didn't work, what they like to eat. Like
she redeemed herself in this one episode. She has crazy superpowers popping up. She's got the psychic thing. She's reading stuff through space. She can hypnotize people. And I mean, she's super cool in this episode. And then she goes back to being like, I feel nothing.
Great feeling of gratitude.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
whatever.
So Picard somehow through television magic, through Star Trek future magic, has gotten himself into the ship's computer. And here's my thing. If you now are one with the ship's computer, you could probably access the database, find your own solution, whatever. The thing that he does is he makes the letter P for Picard. My eye roll was so big when I saw that. I was like, P for Picard. I mean, I was just like, oh, come on. No. Like you could.
So wait, are you saying that's not what you would do if you were an energy being?
Like an A for Andrea somewhere on the comm panel. Like, by the way, where there is no space on a comm panel to make letters because they just have buttons, but whatever. Like you made a P for Picard. Like you could zap yourself into data, give him the rundown, and he could be like, sure, I have figured out how to, no, he gives a P for Picard. Like you couldn't be more annoyingly unhelpful. Like, well, I'm here, but I can't tell you how to
made a different letter. He could have made a C for captain, and then people would have been really thrown. So there's that.
Well, there was the kindergarten. There was the kindergarten detective moment where Riker goes P for Picard. It's like, what else would it mean? Like,
thank you, Sesame Street.
Yes. This show was sponsored by the letter P. Apparently, she's dying over here with her own stupid jokes. Anyway, so he. Shereese, are you okay?
The letter P. This episode was brought to you by the letter P.
Yes. Well, that's kind of the like age range that we were operating at. Like a child could have been P for Captain Picard. You know, it's like you don't need anyway.
Yeah.
My eye roll was really, really big in that moment. I was like, ugh.
The point is, they figured out.
Yeah. Luckily, we've got Captain Picard back. He has that same memory loss. Like, what am I doing here? And then Tasha Yar runs in to the transporter room to talk to Picard going, the Antikins have killed Acele, or maybe the other way around.
It was the Antikins that killed Acele, yeah.
Okay. And and they're like boiling him for like a stew or something.
Yeah, she comes in and she's like, oh my gosh, we need to talk to you right away. And Will is all like, can't this wait a minute? We just got our captain back. And she's like, but it's an emergency. The Antikins went to the chef and they, to the cook and asked if they could cook a special animal for them. And it looks just like the Cele delegate. It's like a big snake. And one of the delegates is missing, and there's a big pile of blood. There's a big puddle of blood outside of his room. So we're worried about it. And then it's just like, wait, what the heck is going on right now? He murdered someone. There's like a pool of blood. And then he took the dead body to like 10 Forward or whatever and had some chefs that, hey, can you just cook this up for me? Like, what is going on with this subplot right now? This is so graphic and disturbing. And it's just thrown as like a side. Like,
yes. And Riker goes, yes, I know all that, but can't this wait? Say hello to the captain. It's like, we don't have time for that. There is a puddle of blood on our carpet and a snake stew being boiled up.
Yeah.
I thought, and Riker had ordered both of the delegate groups restricted to their quarters under armed guard. So what did you guys fuck up so bad?
Yeah.
That now we have to
Tasha, this one's on you.
Delegate. Yeah, this one's on you,
Tasha, because where is your... I'm going to put it on Tasha because she's the head of security. So why was security not locking them down in their rooms? Locking down means you turn off the little open the door thing. So they can't open that door. That means lockdown. That doesn't mean you stand physically outside and every time they come out, you go, excuse me, sir, could you go back in? No. Lockdown means lock it down. It's not off that command code. They can't get out.
Yeah, it's not a safe at home order where you're like, you can leave to go to the grocery store and the pharmacy like right now. False. No, this is a like, you leave and we shoot you.
That's right. And so I'm like, Yar, like, what is going on with your security staff that they were able to not just get into a little scuffle, but murder someone and then have him boiled, like have him cooked and eaten? That's like a lot of steps that your security guards are missing here.
Yeah, you're right. Because I could see like a shootout at the OK Corral happening, right? Where it's like,
and then you come upon the incident.
Yes. But then to like, let's think about what that requires. Then you would have to like drag the body while security is going, I don't know what to do about this. Right? And there's just a trail of blood all the way to 10 Forward. And then you convinced a chef to chop it up and put it into a pot with like herbs and spices and broth and make a freaking stew. Like that takes hours.
There's a lot going wrong here.
That takes
a lot
hours.
going wrong.
Anyway.
And then Picard's response is just like, well, I'm going to take a break. Riker, you're in command. Bye. He's just like, now that I'm back and now that my memory's back, I'm not dealing with this. You can go ahead and take that.
Yeah.
As corny as that ending was, I'll be in the holodeck. I'll be chilling because I need a rest from my space adventure that I don't remember. But so while that was like a corny scene, I was like, at least there was no moral of the story this time, and I really appreciated that. There was no like, well, as long as we know our right place. Like there was no after school special ending to it. So I kind of like that. And I was like, okay, I like how just like, you handle this. Toodles.
I know you don't like the moral, and I'm not a big fan. I don't dislike it as much as you do, but I'm also not a big fan of having like dad give us a lesson at the end of the story because we're not children. But I do think there should have been a moral of that story, which was I'm firing all of my security crew and we're doing like intense retraining starting tomorrow morning because you guys like messed up big time, like big time. Anyway, well, I think that's our episode. I feel like we could go on forever, but do we need to? It's not the best episode. All right. So Shereese, next week we're getting into a really meaty episode. We are going to break down season 1, episode 7, which is Justice. And oh my God, is there a lot to talk about?
Yes, we have a lot to talk about. So come back for that. In the meantime, I want to hear from you. What do you guys think about the Shorty uniform? This was, we're not going to see it too much more. And I just want your thoughts. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Let us know. Send us an email at info@thetngpodcast.com.
I'll put that poll up as well. Shorty uniform, yes or no, on our Instagram at the TNG Podcast as well. Shereese, as always, I love breaking down these episodes with you. We could just talk endlessly about them. So we're really glad that you guys are here to listen with us and to watch with us. And we'll see you next week.
Bye. Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.